Let's take a look at and analyze the top 10 3D animated movies that have generated the most money at the box office. However, we must mention that we are not taking inflation into account, as it would be very difficult to determine what's fair. Keep in mind that we are not judging these movies based on their quality or how much people liked them, but simply by the amount of money they made at the box office. Number 10. Finding Dory. This movie managed to gross $1.029 billion in total and became one of the best sequels we've seen in the world of 3D animation. This possibly happened because, in the first movie, which was Finding Nemo, Dory stood out a lot, and everyone who saw that movie loved her from the start. If you haven't seen this movie, I can tell you that it is very fun, although at the same time a bit frustrating since Dory is a fish that suffers from short-term memory loss, which is why she got lost when she was very young. The challenge for the characters in this movie is to find Dory's parents, which leads them on a great adventure. Number 9. Despicable Me 3. This movie managed to gross $1.034 billion, a little more than Finding Dory, although I can assure you that these characters are possibly more famous than Nemo. We all know that the Despicable Me movies have been very successful, and this is because they offered a different perspective on typical superhero movies. This time, they started telling the story from the villain's perspective, and in this third movie, the story is a bit different. In this movie, the villain is now a hero, and there's a new villain who possibly made Despicable Me 3 so spectacular. Number 8. Toy Story 3. This movie managed to gross $1.067 billion, although it's not the Toy Story movie that made the most money. I think we can all agree that the Toy Story movies are an icon in the world of 3D animation, and despite it sometimes being very difficult to release a sequel when the first movie was so successful, Toy Story has achieved the unthinkable. In this movie, we start to see the life of Bonnie, the new owner of the toys, and we also met one of the best villains in film history, Lotso. Toy Story 3 had it all: action, comedy, suspense, lots of emotions, and we probably all cried in the final part. Number 7. Toy Story 4. This movie managed to gross $1.073 billion, slightly more than the previous one. Everyone said making this movie was a mistake since Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending to a trilogy and a perfect finale for the franchise. The truth is, I must confess that I was also part of that group, but Toy Story 4 left us all speechless as it managed to be on the same level as the previous 3 films in the saga. In this movie, we saw the focus shift slightly as it didn't focus on all the toys. This time, it focused on Woody and Pixar's new hit, Forky. I must say that this character has become a favorite for children and, I believe, also for many adults. Number 6. Minions. This movie managed to gross $1.159 billion, and I think anyone with a bit of intelligence will understand why it was so successful. One of the reasons Despicable Me was so successful was thanks to the Minions, those yellow creatures that are both funny and cute. The story of this movie revolves around the origin of the Minions and how they found Gru. Although the story is very interesting, the reality is that by that point, the Minion stories didn't matter as much. What was most important was all the fun they brought to the audience thanks to the comedy in the movie. Number 5. The Incredibles 2. This movie managed to gross $1.243 billion, and to be honest, this was due to the long wait we had to endure for a sequel. The first movie about this family of superheroes was spectacular, and at the end of the film, they left us with a story they could continue. Unfortunately, it took many years to create this sequel, and because the first movie was so good, when they released the sequel, we all rushed to the theaters to see it. Sadly, the movie wasn't on the same level as the first, but we can say it's still a good movie, although we would have liked to see Jack a bit older to better appreciate his powers. Number 4, Frozen. This movie managed to gross $1.306 billion and left us all frozen with its spectacular story. I must say that I hate movies with a lot of songs, but the songs in this movie are so good that we all know the lyrics and rhythm. The story of these two sisters, who both suffer in different ways, allowed many people to identify with the characters, and the producers touched the hearts of all Disney fans. Even though all the characters in this movie are amazing, one of the characters that helped balance the story was Olaf, the snowman, who brought some comedy and joy. Number 3, Super Mario Bros. This movie grossed $1.361 billion and has become one of the most successful movies based on a video game. Let's be honest, I think it took them a long time to make this movie, as the technology to create animated movies has been around for many years. Although all previous attempts to make a Mario movie had failed, 3D animation was the right path. This movie had action, comedy, emotion, and many spectacular moments that reminded us of the game we've known all our lives. I think the best thing about this movie is that it appeals to children and adults alike, especially those of us who grew up playing all the Mario games. Additionally, Bowser was a spectacular villain, and we got to know a bit more about this character. Number 2, Frozen 2. This movie managed to gross $1.453 billion, and I think this was very obvious since, as I mentioned earlier, Frozen became a historic film, so its sequel had a high chance of success. However, we all know that creating a good sequel after such a successful first movie is very complicated because everyone has high expectations. Frozen 2 exceeded all those expectations and continued the success of this wonderful saga. Number 1, Inside Out 2. This movie grossed $1.674 billion, a very impressive amount for any film. We must say it, Inside Out was spectacular, but this sequel was on the same level, and it possibly even went higher. It seemed impossible to create a sequel that would be as good since Inside Out was such an original movie, and creating something better seemed very difficult, but Pixar did it. The story in this movie perfectly shows what goes on inside the mind of a teenage girl, and while many might think this is easy to achieve, it actually requires many experts to create such a story. In my opinion, I think the best part of this movie was anxiety, a perfect version of this emotion that many people suffer from, and it became a sort of indirect villain. If you like animated movies, like this video and subscribe to the Wizard Multiverse.